A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome everyone to another session of VOTP. And today's important session is on understanding the Hamas case. And we have with us Armaghan Khan, who is a lawyer by profession, and he will be helping us unpack what this case is all about. What are the possible ways the lawyers are going to build this case, and inshallah, at the end of the session, we will be having a question and answer session as well. But before we get started, let me just go ahead and give you a brief intro of VOTP. VOTP stands for Voice of the People, and the whole purpose of this organization is to empower people and help the common man understand the importance of his voice. Based on all what is going on in our world, we realize the importance of everyone doing their job in the right way, and it is the duty of the common man to perform his job in a very accountable and a righteous manner, as well as expect and demand the same of the leaders. So, inshallah, today we have a very, very important topic. And, without further ado, I would go ahead and invite Brother Armaghan Khan to go ahead and help us understand the Hamas case better. Welcome, Brother Armaghan Khan.
Jazakallah. Can I just confirm that I'm audible, my volume and all of that? Because I tend to have issues with that.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so before we start, first of all, because VOTP is registered in England, and also I think some of our, most of our members are basically in the West, so it's very important to understand that these slides are not an expression of personal view or support or any of that sort of stuff. It's just basically, you could say, an explanation or an assessment of the case that's been put to the Home Secretary of the United Kingdom. Okay, so this is an application made by Harqat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, which we call Hamas, basically, to the Secretary of State of the Home Department, also known as the Home Secretary. Now, if you are interested in the nitty-gritties of what this application is, so like if you want to see what exact arguments the legal team has made, or all that sort of like, you could say nerdy stuff, then you could just go online and type the Hamas case, where you will find the application. It's quite a long read, so I mean, if you're up for that, no problem. Right, so before we start, just want to make sure that we understand a few terms. So again, as I previously mentioned, the Home Secretary, or the Secretary of State for the Home Department, is basically the part of the UK government which is responsible for overseeing policing, law enforcement, national security, counter-terrorism, immigration, that kind of stuff. So that's their department. That's what they do. And this is the application which is made to them. It's also important to understand that this application, it's not really a case in that way. There are no judges, nobody's going to court, nobody's wearing wigs or gowns, that sort of stuff. It is just a compilation of documents that are sent to the Home Secretary. Okay, and so before moving on, also I think it's important for everyone to understand what the BSB is, the Bar Standards Board. They're an organization the regulatory body in England and Wales that regulate basically the legal services here. So they ensure that barristers, solicitors, judges, etc., they are basically following their their guidelines and all of that kind of stuff. The reason why I'm explaining this is because if any one of you have had an opportunity to see some of the interviews of the barristers involved in this case. You might have seen a lot of, you could say, a very aggressive um, tone from the media in relation to these barristers, and even um, sort of telling them that they are actually, supporting terrorism and that sort of stuff. So the reason why I'm explaining this organization is going to make sense in the next slide. Okay, now it's also important to understand the distinction, the difference between a lawyer and a solicitor. A lawyer is the person that goes to court, makes an argument, they actually formulate the argument as well. A solicitor is basically someone that drafts documents, send the documents to the judges, and instruction to the barristers as well. They deal with clients mostly. So the way you want to think about it is if you have a case, and obviously this is for England, so obviously for Pakistan it's different. There's no distinction in Pakistan. So, for example, in England, if you have an issue with someone, let's say somebody hit your car and you want to take them to court, you don't really go and talk to a barrister first. You see a solicitor, explain to them what your case is, they send the details to a barrister and they basically argue for it. So that's important as well. Right. So this is our, or well, not our, but the team that are involved in making the application. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, yeah, I'm just making sure. Yeah. So this is the legal team that has been instructed to make the application. So I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure everyone would have seen this face on GB News and some other news agencies in England. So this is Frank McGuinness. He's a barrister from Gardens Court Chambers. This is David Rute, I think that's how you pronounce it. He's also one of the barristers. And then this is Fahd Ansari. He's the solicitor. So Fahd Ansari was instructed by Hamas, and then he instructed these barristers to make the application to the Home Secretary. That's basically how it works. Right. Now, because as I previously mentioned to you, the distinction about barristers and solicitors as well, but also their duties and the Bar Standards Board as well. So in England, how it generally operates is that when a barrister is sent instructions to represent a client, they have to follow what is called the cab rank rule, which basically means that they have to accept instructions if they are competent for the case and if the pay is correct. So basically, if it's a case that you can represent, then you must accept it. If you don't, then you're in breach of some of the regulations. You're in breach of some of your duties, basically. And forgot to mention this, but how it operates for barristers is that they have 10 core duties. So the ones that I've highlighted here are the ones that are relevant to this case, but generally there are 10 core duties, and if you breach any one of them, there can be sort of disciplinary action against the barrister who breaches them. So in this case, if the barrister had just ignored the decision, they could be in trouble. Also, the Bar Standards Board also highlights that the client is separate from the barristers or the legal team that represents them. So they don't really have to have the same views. You can completely disagree with your client, and you might not even believe their case, but you still have to basically put the client's interest first. So your personal views don't really matter. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because a lot of these far right sort of racist news agencies or whatever, they are quite slanderous in that way. So just one thing, so that everyone understands that. Secondly, I'd say that again, these duties also mean that you have to act in the client's best interest. You can't lie. Obviously, if your client's lying, you can't lie to the court. That's like your main duty is justice, basically. So there's that part of it as well. And also that you have to be brave, and they even use the word brave in the bar standards regulations as well. So basically, it doesn't really matter what happens to you. You have to basically try your best to put your client's case forward. Right. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned this previously as well, but well, actually, yes, I did. Now, as I mentioned, this isn't really a court case. So this is basically documents being sent to the Home Secretary. Now, if you go on the website as well, you'll see that they're basically two volumes. So first is the application in of itself. So what actually they're arguing, and then there's supporting documents to basically facilitate their arguments. So the first volume one, and you can see this on the website as well if you're interested. The volume one is basically about what Hamas is, its manifesto, details about Tufan al-Aqsa, the operation that they had on October 7th, and all that kind of stuff. And the second one, the volume two of the documentation in the application, is the expert reports that are provided by different experts in different fields to basically make sure that the Home Secretary has the full picture, that all of the information is provided to her to basically make a decision. So the first one, this is Musa Abdullah Marzouk. He is one of the senior members of Hamas, and he was the one who actually instructed Hamas. Oh, sorry, not Hamas. The legal team to make an application to the Home Secretary. Yes, and then you have different experts in different fields. So you have Dr. Azim Tamimi. You might have seen him. He's quite popular these days. You also have Dr. Asim Qureshi. He's a human rights lawyer, and he's a director at Cage International. So if anyone knows Mozambique, he has a lot of work on Guantanamo Bay. So he's basically his director. And then you have Dr. Usman Latif. So all of them actually have different expertise. So as I forgot to mention, Dr. Azim Tamimi, he's the expert on Hamas. So he's basically studied the movement, its political development, and all of that. Dr. Azim Qureshi is basically the expert on the human rights aspect of the application. So the human rights that are being breached by the Zionist regime, and also giving more detail about how this affects rights of British citizens as well. We'll go into that in a bit more detail as we move forward. Yeah, so the next one you have is Usman Latif. He's a senior lecturer at Sapiens Institute. So for any one of you who knows Hamza Zortia's Muhammad Hijab, basically that institute, so he's one of their senior lecturers there, and he basically provides an expert analysis on the importance of Al-Aqsa to Palestine and sort of the social religious aspect of the movement. And then you have Dr. Sami Al-Rian, who's basically a director in of the Center of Islam and Global Affairs in Istanbul. He gives his own expert opinion about the international law and the geopolitics aspect of it as well. And then you have Professor Avi Shlam. He is a historian, and he's a professor in Oxford, University of Oxford as well. And he gives more expert analysis about the history of Zionism, the historic relationship of the Israeli regime with Britain, and sort of their relationship as well. So basically, all of these experts are to basically give the Home Secretary all the information she needs to make the decision. Okay, so now we move on to the application in of itself. So in 2023, after the Operation Tufan al-Aqsa, the Home Secretary then, Priti Patel, she prescribed or labeled the political wing of Hamas as a terrorist organization, i.e., a proscribed organization. So moving on, I'm just going to use the word prescribed because that's what the law is generally, right? So when I say prescribed, that means a terrorist group, right? Under UK law, obviously. So she made the political wing of Hamas prescribed organization, and this power is given to her by the Terrorism Act, which was in 2000 when it was enacted. And it basically gives the Home Secretary the power to prescribe any organization that she believes is engaging, encouraging, or promoting, or concerned in terrorism. Now, with the law, these words are important because basically with this, they can for any group that has any sort of engagement with violence as a terrorist group. So it's very discretionary. So there's not really like you could say a boxes that they need to check, right? So for example, like if I go to doctor and I tell him I have a cold, he's going to see if my nose is runny, if I've got like a sore throat, temperature, and then he's going to give me some medicine. So that's very like stepwise. It's very rigid in that way. With this, it's just like, oh, okay, so some organization they did some sort of they have some political motive, and there's some sort of violence involved, anything, and you can label them as an organization. And this is also one of the critiques of the current definition of terrorism globally as well. But again, I'm sorry, I was just digressing a bit, but that is basically the power that is given to the Home Secretary. And terrorism involves the prescription of terrorism involves that it's basically two parts. So part one is the mental, so the intention part. So it involves intention to intimidate public or influence governments with the intention. So basically, that's what you want to do. So you want to influence governments or the public to advance a political, religious, racial, ideological cause. So anything basically, so any human action, and obviously that is coupled with violence. So serious violence, damage to property, endangering life, creating public health risks and safety risks, and also the disruption of electronic systems, so hacking that and stuff. So like I said, so if you have these two things, which is possible for any political engagement, I'd say, you can be charged with terrorism. Again, and this discretion is given to the Home Secretary, and she can do that, and she can also consider the impact it would have on the United Kingdom's interest and the global counter-terrorism efforts as well. So these are all the things that the Home Secretary considers when she is prescribing a group. Yes. So this is basically the act in of itself. So that is Section 1 that defines terrorism. And then you have Section 3 of the Terrorism Act 2000, which gives the Home Secretary power to prescribe. This slide is basically a summary type. I tried to summarize it the best way I could, but otherwise it's very annoying in that way. Right, so this is what the application is about. So Section 4 of the Terrorism Act basically gives an option for an organization that is being proscribed, or any person that's been affected by the prescription of that organization. So you don't have to be a member of that group. If you are affected by it in some direct way, you can also make an application on their behalf as well. And what that does is gives them opportunity to make submissions to the Home Secretary and say that, you shouldn't prescribe us, right? Obviously, there's a methodology and everything to it. I'll explain that in a bit. Now, the prescription can be made by the organization. And again, in this case, like the problem becomes because they're a prescribed organization, so they can't really directly engage with the UK government because they don't acknowledge them as a proper political entity. So therefore, they have to make an application through someone. In this case, Section 4, subsection 2 of the Act basically defines who makes an application. It's not relevant to this discussion, but that's just what the law is. Right, so the way you do it is basically you state the name of the organization, the applicant that makes it. In our case, or sorry, in this case, it was Dr. Musa Abdul Marzouk who made the application. Where it was, and he basically instructed the legal team to make an application, and you then set the grounds for removal. So basically, the arguments. Now, there's some requirements on the Home Secretary that she has to basically give a response in 90 days. If she refuses, then a decision can be appealed, and that is specifically to the POAC, the Prescribed Organizations Appeal Commission, and then they can assess if her decision was if it was legally sound, if it was correct according to the law, if it was if her argument for rejecting it were irrational or incorrect in the way she did it. And also they assess the ECHR, which are basically the European Convention of Human Rights. So if they're in breach of that as well. And then if they find that that is the case, they can basically overturn her decision and do it themselves. But first you have to make the application to de-prescribe to the Home Secretary. Now, in this application, there are 3 grounds. First one is that the prescription is contrary to England's obligations under international law to not be complicit in a genocide and not be complicit in crimes against humanity and to respect the dignity of the people of Palestine. The second is that the prescription breaches freedom of expression, assembly rights, and it is also applied in a discriminatory manner. And the third one is that the prescription is disproportionate. So the first one is basically more to do with international law. So England is a signatory to the United Nations Charter as well, and then other treaties or commissions of the United Nations, such as the Genocide Convention, the Rome Statutes, and all of that. Those details are not really relevant to our discussion right now because we're just talking about the application in of itself. But the government of Britain is under obligation to basically prevent. So it's their job to prevent, or at least not be complicit in a genocide. And they have to actively do this, right? So it's basically like, I don't know, if I'm walking down the road and I see a child drowning, I have to, protect the child and obviously look for my safety as well if I can do it reasonably and all of that. But it's basically their job to do it under international law. Secondly is the aspect of crimes against humanity. So there's a difference between the two. So genocide is you are trying to completely wipe out or finish a part of a substantial number of people in a group. So it can be a different religion, ethnicity, etc., which is actually going on in Gaza right now. The International Criminal Court have ruled in the interim judgment that there is a plausible genocide, which means that there's a risk, and therefore England must do everything it can to prevent it, or at least not be complicit. So with the proscription, Hamas is arguing that they are being complicit in a genocide, and I'll explain that in a bit more detail in a minute. Second is crimes against humanity. So that's another type of crime. So just think of it in the way of like the difference between murder, right? And then difference between hitting someone or assaulting someone. So crimes against humanity are basically collective punishment, starving a population. So that's what the Israeli regime is doing there as well. So they have to not be complicit in that. So that's a negative duty. They have to stop doing that. With the genocide thing, they have to actively not be complicit in a genocide. It's a matter of doing something rather than not doing it, if that makes sense. The second one is that they have to end the unlawful occupation of the occupied territories in Palestine. So those are not just the occupation of Gaza and West Bank, but also the borders of 1967, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so that's if you're supporting the Israeli regime now, you're basically breach of that duty as well. And finally, the duty to respect the dignity of the people of Palestine, which basically means human rights, the right to life, right to religion, right to family, that kind of stuff. Now, Hamas is arguing because they are, and it is also accepted, well, not accepted, but argued by many experts in that regard. So, for example, Avi Shlem and others argue that Hamas is the only legitimate organization that actually is fighting against occupation. So thereby prescribing Hamas, England is breaching all of these duties because Hamas is the only one that is standing against Israel to actually stop it. Because, for example, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, they basically, and it's argued in the on the application that they are basically they work for Israel, basically. So that is the first one. The first ground is related to international law. The second ground is related to the local law. So the Human Rights Act of 1998 basically has incorporated the human rights treaty in England. So whenever we say human rights, whenever anyone says human rights, it comes from the European Convention of Human Rights, which is a treaty. And when England passed the Act of the Human Rights Act, 1998, they made those laws bound in England. The basically only difference is that English courts can basically give judgments on human rights. Basically, what I'm trying to say. Normally, you would have to go to the International Court of Human Rights, the ECHR. Sorry. Okay. Now, what the application argues is that firstly, it's a breach of Section 6 of the Human Rights Act, which means that the public authority, so in this case, police or the English government as well, but they use bodies, the government bodies that enforce this prescription are basically acting in a way which is not compatible with the human rights legislation in England and also the European Convention of Human Rights. Just think of them as the same thing. Yeah, I'm sorry that was just, I went on about that I didn't really need to mention that. But number one is freedom of speech. So for those who support the Palestinians' right to resist, they can't because they'll go to jail. Obviously, if they resist, they're it restricts it in a way because you have to be very careful about how you articulate Palestinians' right to resist, because the right to resist using armed resistance, right? So using violence against the occupier, the Zionists in this case, is in international law, it's enshrined. There's no doubt about this. But obviously, because the group is prescribed here, so if there's any sort of statement that resembles you supporting the prescribed group, i.e. Hamas, you're in trouble, right? So there's that issue as well. And there's also the problem of freedom of assembly. So obviously you have right to say something, but this involves tweeting, social media, it's that kind of stuff. And then the right to protest, basically you protest in support for the resistance. And yes, okay. Now, the application argues that England is, or Britain is basically hindering the rights of UK citizens, right, to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And this right can be restricted by government generally. It's well understood in human rights law, but it has to be for the right reasons. So it has to be to protect national interests, right? Or it's necessary for a democratic society. Now, the application argues that this is not the case. It is not in the interest of the United Kingdom to restrict people's speech, and it is not necessary for a democratic state because it's got nothing to really do with democracy in that way. So they're saying that it is incorrect in that way. And finally, the right to enjoy these rights without discrimination. And what the third point means is that Zionist supporters can openly support the IDF or Israel's right to use violence, but Palestinian activists can't, right? And that basically you're restricting one group's right rather than the other one, i.e., you're basically curtailing their rights or you're discriminating against them. Now, this is the second ground. I hope everybody has an understanding of that now. And then the final one is that the application is disproportionate. And what that basically means is that the resistance, Hamas, is not really a threat to Britain. And they use I forgot the word, but basically the history of Hamas and their own declaration and their members as well. So it says that whether the group has ever made any or shown any interest in trying to attack England in that way, Britain, sorry. And the application argues that that is not the case. They're only there to resist occupation, which they can under international law. It also argues that Britain, I keep saying England. So Britain's also undermining democracy because, as previously mentioned, if not, Hamas is also an elected group in Gaza, and it was observed by many international organizations and also United States Foreign Secretary or someone as well. I forget. Not Foreign Secretary, a diplomat. I think in 2003 or seven when it was. They said that it was a free election, so it was a valid election, and basically with the continued prescription, people can't really support Hamas, or people that are here, for example, in England, they can't. If anyone in their family votes for Hamas, they'll be prescribed with the organization because you're supporting them. So basically, that is one of their arguments as well. So they're saying that it's not proportionate because you are basically going against the principle of democracy as well. Another argument is that it prevents a political solution, not situation. and they use Dr. Ismail Wadi, who was a member of the African National Congress, the ANC. The ANC is basically Nelson Mandela's party, and they were prescribed as a terrorist group. And then when they were removed from that group, they had a chance to engage in elections and they won. So therefore, I mean, what the argument here is that basically, if you remove the prescription, there can be a political solution for this matter. Finally, or actually, sorry, two more points is that this also has an impact on humanitarian aid. So basically, what they're saying is that some charities that want to give aid in Gaza, they have to engage with the government there, which is Hamas. And the problem with the prescription is that if the way the definition of terrorism is that any engagement with the organization would also make these charities a part of that group as well. So aiding, abetting, etc., etc. So that also causes a problem there because you're restricting humanitarian aid legally as well. And then finally, the argument of mass criminalization, which basically means that because Hamas is the government there and they are responsible for paying people's salary. So, for example, from your school teacher, government school teacher, to the person that's cleaning the streets, if their salary is being paid by Hamas, they're by definition terrorist. And therefore, if someone in their family is in England wants to send them some money, that person in England is also then a terrorist as well. So even legally, it doesn't make sense because you can't really, how do you apply the law to this? And how are the courts even going to engage with this in such a mass scale? So that is basically the entire thing. So the argument with proportionality is that it doesn't really make sense legally. That's what they're trying to say in that way. So those are the three grounds, and all of those grounds have basically separate arguments. And if you look at the case online as well, you'll see that it's obviously a lot more well argued than what I'm trying to do because I'm just trying to summarize their arguments. You don't really have the evidence, or I'm not really engaging with the evidence so much because I'm just explaining to you what the application is. But if you do look at that, it would make a lot more sense to you. Finally, the application concludes with stating verbatim that the problem is Zionism and occupation. They also state that Britain, sorry, I keep saying England. There's a distinction between England and Britain, but I'm just used to saying England all the time. So they are under international obligations, and if they don't do that, they're breach of international law. And finally, it also gives, you could say, like a give and take offer to the Home Secretary. So it says that while you should go against the Zionist occupation because those are your legal obligations, you should basically prevent genocide and apartheid and war crimes. If you don't do that, you can at least not restrict discussion on this matter, right? So that's basically one final thing that argument that they make in the application. And obviously, for someone who's just finished their degree, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the application, but it's very, very well argued. It's a very, very good case. And they have made this application on 9th April. So the Home Secretary was this lady right here. I don't remember her name because I just didn't care to check it. But she has 2 months to respond to the application. And if anyone's interested, you can find it online. Just search the Hamas case and you can see all the documentation there. Right, so those are my submissions. Now, does anybody have any questions?
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Armaghan, for explaining to us, what this application is about, and what are the the grounds, or what are the arguments posed by the legal team. So, inshallah, we will go ahead and take questions and answers. Please go ahead. You could raise your hand, and or you could type it in the chat, and inshallah, we will go ahead and take them.
I'm going to stop the recording now.